Can buyers tell sellers what they can pay their agent? So that's the topic today, everyone. Can buyers tell sellers what they can pay their agents? So, in all the things that are happening in real estate with buyer's agency and commissions and what we could ask for as agents and should ask for, that question is starting to come up. This is why. And again, what I love about what's happening, it's getting us to talk, it's getting us to reevaluate our worth and what we do and how much we charge for our services. But this one question keeps coming up when I have buyers because I love these changes because I keep on telling agents, they keep on saying this, our buyers agents. What happens if a seller doesn't want to pay me as a buyer's agent? Again, what happens if a seller doesn't want to pay me? The first thing I've been saying and will continue to say is because why are you worried about that? Because we've been in such a seller's market. We're ingrained in the seller's market, but it's changing in a lot of places. So what I'm trying to explain that this could flip, and what I'm trying to train our listing agents. We as agents have to tell and communicate with each other what we are charging our clients. It is out there. We have to, as buyer's agents, we have to ask for it. We have a buyer's agreement. We have to sign a buyer's agreement with our buyers before and figuring out how much we want to get paid or how much we charge our buyers or how much the buyers are going to make sure the sellers pay us or a combination of both. We've been through this to our sellers, to the sellers. And listing agents, you have to be professional. You have to be ethical. You have to be fair. What I mean by that, listing agents, listen to this. When a buyer's agent comes to you and explains, I have a buyer's agreement, it's already agreed to the amount of money I'm making, it's to, already agreed that they put in the buyer agreement. If they have this, then in our listings, buyer's agreements, we're going to have this in there. If of course, the buyers and the agents could change that, but we're suggesting this, that the buyer requests the seller to pay the compensation. So when our buyers agents come to our listings, if they come to our listings, we training our listing agent to make sure that's non-negotiable. It's already been agreed to. They want the seller to pay. Please explain that to your sellers. But so many times buyers agents and some of our same agents, our listing agent, well, what happens if the seller doesn't want to pay it? So this is the whole point of this videotape. What happens if it's flipped? What happens if it's flipped? It's a buyer because you're playing around with the buyer's agent's commission when it's already agreed to with the buyer. Don't play around with their commission. It's already in a contract with a buyer's agreement. Explain that to your seller. It's there. Again, some sellers push back. But what I'm trying to explain to the listing agent, because some just say, well, I'm the listing agent. I will always get paid because I have an agreement, a listing agreement. Well, why does the listing agreement in writing is more secure than a buyer's agreement? And why, when a a buyer's agent comes and you say seller goes, no, I don't want to pay him that, even though it's in the contract and it's part of the negotiation, and you as a listing agent just feel so secure that your commission's not going to be negotiable. If you let a seller, imagine this. This is I'm not talking numbers. Imagine a seller saying, I don't want to pay more than X% total commission to agents. Okay. But I want this buyer, and this buyer has wants this house, and this seller wants this buyer, but that seller refuses to want to pay because you as a listing agent have not did a good job explaining to them you might pay more than this. You're not going to pay just this. You might, it's part of the negotiation. And guess what happens? This buyer is already in an agreement with their buyer's agent. They want to pay. I'm throwing out numbers, just want to let you know. Imagine you just explain to your seller, you might only have to pay 4% commission. I'll just throw that in. And then this buyer's agent's coming in at 3. They're coming in at 3. And then their seller has got a offer that they want to take, but they don't want to pay 7% total. 4 to their listing agent, 3 to their the buyer's agent. They might want to only want to pay 4. But this buyer can't buy this house because he's already got an agreement to pay his agent 3%. Guess what that seller is going to do next? Is going to go to you as a listing agent and go, I'm only paying 4. I'm not buying. I want this buyer, and that this buyer won't budge and wants me to pay 3% to their agent. And you, listing agent, are taking 1%. Let that settle in. It's going to happen out there. It will happen to agents, listing agents that don't do a good job explaining to their sellers before they go in to the listing, it's all a negotiation. Yes, it is. We don't know what we're going to see, but I can't guarantee you're only going to pay, I'm just throwing out a number, 4%. I can't guarantee that. It's not going to happen. We don't know for sure until these buyers come. You might pay 7%. You might pay 8%. Who knows? If this buyer comes, if you want to have this serious conversation, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is a buyer's market. There's 20 houses on your street for sale. Every one of the sellers on this street is trying to do their best and get a buyer into their house because there's not enough buyers. It's going to happen. It's happening in other parts of the country right now today. And those sellers will pay anything to sell their house. They'll pay 8%. They'll pay 10%. They'll pay the buyer's closing costs. They'll paint the house, replace the carpet. The sellers are getting desperate in a lot of places in the country, and it's getting in certain places it's going to get even worse. But in Ohio, not the case yet, still seller's market. But I wanted to get the word out there is that to listing agents, and the whole point of this is if we start negotiating commissions and don't explain to our clients, we're in contracts. We have a listing agreement that says they have to pay this, and we have a buyer's agreement that says they have to pay this. We agree to that. It's transparent. But then if we allow the clients to renegotiate those contracts. Again, they've already been agreed to. They've been negotiated. I'm talking about after that. So that's how I feel, if that makes sense, when a listing agent says to a seller, go ahead, cut the commission. This offer, the buyer's asking to pay their agent. And you as a listing agent, you can't not force them, but don't do a good job explaining. No, it's part of the deal. The commission's there. They've already agreed to it. They have an agreement. We can't play around because if you shoot back an offer from a seller, negotiating commission that's already been agreed to in writing in a buyer's agreement and a listing agreement, then you open up a can of worms and you're renegotiating things that you already have the clients sign. And next thing you know, you're going to have buyers telling sellers, I don't want you to pay your agent any more than this because then I'm over, that theory that they're overpaying. Imagine that. Imagine in a buyer's market, a buyer coming to the seller, say, if I buy this house, I only want the seller to pay you this. That's the same thing in reverse is when a buyer's agent asking a seller to pay them, and the seller says, no, I'm not paying them that. It's the same thing as a buyer saying, I don't want you to pay your listing agent that. Again, in my opinion, a seller saying to you as a listing agent, I don't want to pay that buyer's agent this, even though it's in the contract, is the same thing as a buyer. Someday a buyer's agent go, no, I want to see how much the seller's paying you, and I don't want them to pay you as a listing agent more than this. Think about that. But this is such a foreign concept because we have been such a seller's market that when this flips, or when you ever find a seller that's desperate to sell their house and there's no buyer out there for their type of house. And that buyer, that one buyer comes in saving the day, that seller's going to do anything that buyer says or asks for to sell their property. And what would you feel as a listing agent if that buyer and buyer's agent started negotiating your commission that's already agreed to in a listing agreement? Making sure I'm clear on that, because I don't know if someone that's not a realtor understands, like, oh my God, they're price fixing. No, you as all agents want to be clear on this. A listing agent at time of listing is having a negotiation talks, explaining their value and what they do for the money they charge. Buyer's agent, same thing. When you sit down with them, with your clients, before you start showing houses, you're going to decide how much your expertise and your time is worth and agree to that with the buyer. And who's paying, the seller, buyer, or a combination of both. I love this, but the one thing I'm concerned about is agents, listing agents, explaining or understanding that the buyer's agent's commission is just as important as theirs. And if we have agreements on how it's getting paid, it's part of the offer, and it's all transparent, which is great. But I can't say the word allow, but do your experience and your expertise of negotiating, explaining to your clients, this is part of the offer. This is what they're asking. We can't play around with the commission. As we start playing around with commission, renegotiating agreements as a listing agent and a buyer's agent we've already agreed to. And that is a slippery slope in any business, not just real estate, any business. It's kind of like if you have another business and you agree on a price of, say you have a service business, if you're, I don't know, a contractor and you go and you do the work at someone's house and all of a sudden the people go, let's renegotiate. It's already done. The work's already done. And they're renegotiating the price. I know there's people out there that do that all the time, but I feel that in our industry, with what's been happening, people are thinking we're more negotiable even when we have an agreement. And we are, as agents, sometimes we crumble because we want to help our clients so much. And you know why? And again, I could go on and on for this, and I'll try to keep this a little bit shorter. You know why? Because we've put a lot of agents, not every agent, little value to our time, because we know it's all time and expert and advice. When, like example, a contractor does work at your house, they have if they didn't do it all themselves, they have to pay people, they have to get supplies and all of that, and rent equipment if they have to. They invest a lot of money and time and payroll to do work. So there could be a loss there. With us as realtors, we just think about our time. And we crumble because we're like, oh, it's just our time. I didn't put a lot of money into this. Imagine if you had money invested, a lot of money. I'm like thousands of dollars. Say you had a listing and you're making a $10,000 commission. You have $8,000 invested in it and you're only making two. That's like a contractor. So we put little value on our time. Sometimes we crumble. And this is a time, it's not the time to crumble anymore. This is the time we are valued for why people hire us. And you diminish your value when you start negotiating the price of your time and expertise and effort, and that 24/7 support for your client. All right, that's it. I'm sorry, I could go on and on, but just think about that. But remember, reach out to me, call, text, email me anytime. Happy to talk to you about what's going on in real estate. Have a good one. Bye-bye.